The Colorado River ran copper-red beneath the setting sun, and Grace Mercer knelt at its edge with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Her daughter's face was fever-hot, the child's lips cracked and bleeding from 3 days without proper water. 7 years old, and Lily was dying in her arms. Grace's wedding ring, the only thing of value she had left, glinted in her palm. Surely, someone in the camp downstream would trade food and medicine for gold. Surely God wouldn't let her baby die out here in this merciless wilderness. She pressed her forehead against Lily's damp curls and whispered a prayer that felt like screaming. The sound of boots on river stones made her spin around, clutching Lily closer. A man stood 10 feet away, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered duster coat that had seen too many miles. A revolver hung low on his hip. His face was all sharp angles and sun-darkened skin, but his eyes, pale blue like winter ice, fixed on the child in Grace's arms, with an expression she couldn't name. "Please," Grace's voice cracked. "My daughter needs a doctor. I have gold." She thrust the ring toward him with a trembling hand. "It's real. It's worth something. I just need help getting to town." If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. It truly matters to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. Thank you for your support. The stranger's jaw tightened. He glanced at the ring, then back to Lily's flushed face, then to Grace's desperate eyes. When he spoke, his voice was low and rough as gravel. "Gold isn't what we need here. Put that away." Grace's heart plummeted. She'd heard stories about men like this, outlaws who took what they wanted. Her arms tightened around Lily protectively, even though she knew she was no match for him. But he was already moving past her, dropping to one knee beside the river. He pulled a canteen from his belt, dunked it full, then soaked a bandana in the cold water. "How long has she been like this?" 3 days, Grace whispered. "We ran out of water. I tried to find clean streams, but everything's been dry or poisoned with alkali. She's got fever flux, needs willow bark tea and cool compresses." He turned those ice-blue eyes on her. "Can you ride?" Yes, but we have no horse. We've been walking. My camp's 2 miles north. I've got supplies." He stood, adjusting the brim of his hat. "Name's Colt Dawson. I'm not going to hurt you or your girl, but we need to move now. That fever gets much higher and we'll lose her." Grace searched his face for deception and found only grim determination. Lily whimpered against her chest, and the decision made itself. "Grace Mercer, and this is Lily." Colt nodded once, then moved up the riverbank to where a massive black stallion stood ground-tied in the cottonwood shadows. Within moments, he'd lifted both Grace and Lily into the saddle with surprising gentleness, then swung up behind them. His arm came around Grace's waist to steady her, solid as an iron bar, and she felt the heat of him through her thin, travel-stained dress. "Hold tight," he murmured against her hair. And then they were flying across the darkening prairie. His camp was simple: a lean-to shelter, a fire ring, supplies packed with military precision. Colt worked with quiet efficiency, settling Lily on his bedroll, brewing willow bark tea over the flames, wringing out cool cloths to lay across the child's forehead and chest. Grace watched his large, scarred hands move with unexpected tenderness, and something in her chest loosened for the first time in days. "You know medicine," she said softly. "Learned from a Cheyenne woman who saved my life once." He tipped the teacup to Lily's lips, coaxing her to drink. "Had fever flux myself after taking a bullet. She kept me alive when I should have died. Were you? Grace hesitated. Are you an outlaw, Mr. Dawson? Those winter blue eyes flicked to hers, unreadable. Did my time. Now I work cattle drives and keep to myself. He turned back to Lily. You running from someone? Grace's throat closed. The memory of Harold Hutchins' meaty hands on her arms, his whiskey breath hot against her face, his promise that he'd take Lily and discipline her proper once they were married. It all crashed over her like a wave. Yes. Colt didn't press. He just nodded and went back to tending Lily, re-wetting the cloths, checking her pulse, murmuring soft reassurances when the child whimpered. By midnight, the fever had broken. Lily slept peacefully for the first time in days, color returning to her cheeks. Grace sat across the fire from Colt, exhausted beyond measure but unable to sleep. Why did you help us? He was quiet for a long moment, firelight painting shadows across his angular face. My sister died when she was about your daughter's age. Fever took her. I wasn't there. His jaw clenched. I was in prison for stealing horses. Couldn't even say goodbye. I'm sorry, Grace whispered. I see a woman and child worth saving. I help. Simple as that. He met her eyes across the flames. You're not property, Grace Mercer. Whatever you're running from, whoever thinks they own you, they're wrong. Tears burned Grace's eyes. No one had said her name like that before, like she was a person who mattered. Thank you, she managed. Get some sleep. We'll talk about what comes next in the morning. But morning brought complications. Grace woke to find Colt crouched by the fire, his body tense, eyes fixed on the horizon. We've got riders coming. 3 of them, pushing hard. Grace's blood turned to ice. She recognized the lead horse, even from a distance, Harold's big bay gelding. It's him, the man I ran from. He has the sheriff with him. He'll say I stole from him, that I'm a criminal. But you steal anything? No, but Harold Hutchins is the richest man in Silver Creek. The sheriff does whatever he says. Grace's voice climbed with panic. He'll take Lily. He said he would. He said she needs proper discipline from a father. Colt's expression went cold and dangerous. That's not going to happen. He stood, adjusting his gun belt. You and Lily stay behind the lean-to. Don't come out until I say. He'll kill you, Grace breathed. Harold's killed men before. Everyone knows it, but no one can prove... Grace. Colt's voice cut through her fear like a blade. I'll die before I hurt you or your daughter, but I'm not planning on dying today. He touched her cheek briefly, calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. Trust me. The riders thundered into camp. Harold Hutchins, red-faced and furious, flanked by Sheriff Morrison and one of Harold's ranch hands. Harold's eyes swept the camp and landed on Grace with undisguised rage. There you are, you ungrateful thief. Harold's voice boomed across the campsite. Sheriff, arrest this woman. She stole money from my safe and kidnapped her own child. That's a lie, Grace said, stepping forward despite Colt's warning glance. Her voice shook, but held steady. I took nothing but what belonged to me, and Lily is my daughter. You can't kidnap your own child. You were promised to me, Harold snarled. That makes the girl mine, too. The lady said no, Colt interrupted quietly. He stood between Harold's horse and Grace, hand resting casually on his revolver. I suggest you respect that. Harold's face purpled. And who the hell are you? Another drifter trying to get between a man and his rightful... Colt Dawson. The name fell like a stone into still water. Sheriff Morrison went pale. Even Harold hesitated. The name meant something out here, A reputation built on lightning-fast draws and a string of dead men who'd pushed too hard. "You're interfering with the law, Dawson," the sheriff said nervously. "Mr. Hutchins has filed charges. Then he can file them with a judge," Colt said evenly. "But the woman and child stay here. They're under my protection now." "Your protection?" Harold laughed, an ugly sound. "You think that means anything? I own this county. One word from me, and you'll hang for harboring fugitives." "Maybe," Colt's voice dropped to something deadly quiet, "but you'll be dead before they tie the noose. So ask yourself, Harold Hutchins, is this woman worth your life?" The standoff stretched like a drawn bowstring. Grace could see Harold calculating, weighing his pride against his survival instinct. The sheriff's hand hovered near his gun, but made no move to draw. The ranch hand looked ready to bolt. Then Lily's small voice broke the silence. "Mister, can you be my pa for just one day?" She stood at the edge of the lean-to, fever-bright eyes fixed on Colt. "Just so he can't take me? Please?" The words hung in the air like a prayer. Colt's expression softened. He looked at Lily, then at Grace, then back to Harold with ice in his eyes. "You heard the child. I'm her father now. You've got no claim here." "That's not— You can't just—" Harold sputtered. "I can and I am." Colt moved toward Lily, scooped her up gently, and settled her on his hip, like he'd done it 1,000 times. The child wrapped her thin arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. "We're a family, and family protects each other. So unless you want to explain to the territorial judge why you're trying to steal another man's wife and daughter, I suggest you ride out." Harold's hand dropped to his gun. "I'll see you dead for this, Dawson." The draw was so fast, Grace barely saw it. One moment Colt's hand was supporting Lily, the next, his Colt. .45 was leveled at Harold's chest. "Go ahead and try." Sheriff Morrison grabbed Harold's arm. "Let's go, Harold. This isn't worth it. The man's got legal claim if he says they're family." "Legal claim?" Harold's voice rose to a shout. "They just met." "Can you prove that?" Colt asked mildly. "Because I'm happy to swear before any judge that Grace is my wife and Lily is my stepdaughter. I've got friends in the territory who'll back that story. Do you have proof otherwise?" The standoff ended not with gunfire, but with Harold Hutchins' furious retreat, threatening lawsuits and revenge, promising this wasn't over. But as the dust from their horses settled, Grace knew the truth. It was over. Harold had lost, and he knew it. Colt holstered his gun and looked at Grace over Lily's head. "That story about being my wife, we're going to need to make it real. For Lily's protection, for yours." Grace's heart hammered. "You want to marry me? You don't even know me." "I know enough." He shifted Lily in his arms. "I know you'd walk 3 days through desert to save your daughter. I know you're brave enough to run from a man who could have destroyed you. I know you deserve better than what life's handed you." He paused, those ice-blue eyes holding hers. "I'm not offering romance, Grace. I'm offering partnership, protection, a home where you and Lily can be safe. What would you get from this arrangement?" Something flickered in his expression. Loneliness, maybe. Or old grief, someone to come home to. A reason to build something instead of just drifting. A chance to be more than I've been. It should have felt like trading one prison for another. But when Grace looked at Colt Dawson holding her daughter with such careful tenderness, when she remembered how he'd stood between them and danger without hesitation, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like hope. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes." The wedding happened 3 days later in a small chapel in Redemption Creek. witnessed by the circuit judge and a handful of curious townspeople. Grace wore a simple blue calico dress that Colt had bought her, and Lily stood between them during the vows, holding both their hands. When the judge pronounced them married, Colt kissed Grace's forehead, brief and chaste, but the warmth of it lingered like a promise. They settled into a rhythm over the following weeks. Colt's ranch was small but well-maintained, a sturdy cabin with glass windows and a barn for the horses. Grace cooked and mended and gradually transformed the bachelor quarters into a home. Lily followed Colt everywhere, chattering endlessly about the chickens and the cattle and the foals born in early spring. And Grace watched her stranger husband with growing fascination. He was gentle with Lily, patient with the horses, careful with his words. But she caught him watching her sometimes with an intensity that made her breath catch. When she braided her hair in the morning, when she hummed while cooking, when she laughed at one of Lily's stories. One evening, a month after the wedding, Grace cut her hand while preparing dinner. The knife slipped, and blood welled up bright red across her palm. She gasped, more from surprise than pain. But suddenly Colt was there, his hands closing around hers. "Let me see." His voice was rough with concern. He led her to the basin, carefully cleaned the wound, wrapped it in clean linen with surprising skill. "Go slow," he murmured when she tried to pull away. "It hurts, I know." Grace looked up at him, at the concentration in his face, the gentleness of his touch. "You take care of everyone," she said softly. "But who takes care of you, Colt Dawson?" Something shifted in his expression. "Don't need taking care of. Everyone needs someone." She didn't pull her hand away when he finished wrapping it. "Even outlaws who pretend to be made of stone." "I'm not pretending." But his thumb traced a circle on the inside of her wrist, over her pulse point. "Grace, I need to tell you something. This arrangement, I said it wasn't about romance. I meant to keep it that way. But I'm finding that harder than I expected." Her heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when you smile, I forget how to breathe. I'm saying that Lily has more of my heart than I knew I had left to give. I'm saying this stopped being an arrangement somewhere between I do and now, and I don't know what to do about it." He released her hand, stepped back, ran his fingers through his dark hair in frustration. "You didn't sign up for complicated. You signed up for protection and safety. I won't ask for more than you want to give." Grace stared at him, this hard, dangerous man who'd become soft around the edges, who tucked Lily into bed each night with ridiculous stories, who always made sure Grace had the warmest blanket, who hadn't touched her beyond necessary contact, but looked at her like she was water in a desert. "What if I want complicated?" she whispered. Colt went still. "Grace, what if I want more than an arrangement?" She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. "What if I've been falling for my own husband and didn't know how to say it?" The kiss was inevitable, months of tension finally breaking like a summer storm. Colt's hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the calluses, and Grace rose on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was slow and searching, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Colt pressed his forehead to hers. "Together?" he asked, voice rough with emotion. "Together," Grace agreed. But peace never lasted long in the West. The trouble came on a scorching July afternoon, when Grace was alone at the cabin, Lily napping inside, Colt out checking the fence lines on the north pasture. 3 riders approached. Harold Hutchins and 2 hired guns she didn't recognize. Grace's blood ran cold, but she grabbed the rifle Colt had taught her to shoot and stepped onto the porch. "You're not welcome here, Harold. Leave." Harold's smile was cruel. "Where's your husband, Grace? Off playing cowboy?" "That's convenient." He dismounted, and the 2 gunmen flanked him. "You know, I've had time to think about how you embarrassed me, how you chose a 2-bit outlaw over me. I've decided I'm not willing to let that stand." "Colt will kill you if you touch me," Grace said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "Colt Dawson won't get the chance. My men have him pinned down in the North Canyon. Ambushed him about an hour ago, probably dead already." Harold took a step closer. "So it's just you and me now, sweetheart, and that little brat inside." Terror and rage warred in Grace's chest. "You're lying." "Am I?" Harold's grin widened. "Only one way to find out. But first, you're going to put down that rifle and come with me, or I'll burn this cabin to the ground with your daughter inside." Grace's hands shook on the rifle. She could shoot 1, maybe 2, but not all 3. And if Harold's men had ambushed Colt? No, she refused to believe it. Colt was too smart, too fast. He was alive. He had to be. "Mama?" Lily's sleepy voice came from the doorway. "What's happening?" "Lily, go back inside," Grace started, but Harold lunged forward, grabbing the child. Lily screamed, and Grace's finger found the trigger without thinking. "Always so stubborn," he was saying. "Could have been easy, Grace. Could have been nice. But you had to choose the hard way." The gunshot was impossibly loud. Harold's hat flew off his head, and he dove for cover with a curse. Grace turned her head, fighting unconsciousness, and saw the most beautiful thing she'd ever witnessed. Colt Dawson riding hard across the prairie, rifle raised, face set in lines of deadly fury. What followed was chaos, gunfire and shouting, horses screaming, men running. Grace tried to crawl toward where Harold had dropped Lily, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Blood soaked her dress, hot and wet. She could hear Colt's voice, low and vicious, hear the meaty impact of his fists, hear someone begging for mercy. Then gentle hands were lifting her, and Colt's face filled her vision, streaked with dirt and blood, but alive, gloriously alive. "Grace, stay with me. Stay with me, sweetheart." "Lily," she managed. "She's safe. I've got her. But I need you to stay awake." His hands pressed against her side, trying to stop the bleeding. "You're gonna be fine. You hear me? I won't lose you. I can't lose you." "Harold, he's not going to bother anyone anymore," Colt said grimly. "None of them are. Just focus on breathing, Grace. Nice and slow. That's it." The ride to town was a blur of pain and Colt's voice, steady and sure, talking her through each mile. Dr. Hendricks in Redemption Creek was young but capable, and he worked through the night while Colt paced the floor outside, Lily sleeping fitfully in his arms. By dawn, the doctor emerged, exhausted but smiling. "She'll make it." Bullet went clean through. Missed anything vital. "She's strong, your wife." Colt's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Can I see her?" "She's sleeping, but yes, keep it quiet." Grace woke to afternoon sunlight and the feel of Colt's hand wrapped around hers. His head bowed as if in prayer. "Hey," she whispered, and he jerked upright, eyes red-rimmed but blazing with emotion. "You scared the hell out of me," he said roughly, then kissed her knuckles. "Don't ever do that again." "You were supposed to be dead," Harold said. Ambush didn't work. They weren't as good as they thought. Colt's jaw tightened. If I'd been 5 minutes later, but you weren't. Grace squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. You saved us, again. You saved yourself. You shot at Harold, protected Lily, fought through a bullet wound. Colt's voice cracked. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. Grace Mercer. He caught himself. Grace Dawson. I like the sound of that, she whispered. So do I. He leaned forward, kissed her forehead, her temple, her lips, soft and reverent. I love you. Should have said it before. Should have said it every day. I love you, and Lily, and this life we're building, and I'm never letting anything threaten it again. Tears slipped down Grace's cheeks. I love you too, my outlaw, my husband, my Colt. The recovery was long, weeks of bed rest and careful healing. Colt nursed her with the same patience he'd shown Lily that first night by the river. He changed her bandages, fed her broth when she was too weak to hold the spoon, read to her from dime novels that made her laugh. Lily brought wildflowers every day, arranged them in chipped cups by the bedside. By late summer, Grace was strong enough to build a bigger barn. I want a garden, Grace added. Vegetables and flowers, maybe some fruit trees. Mama, can we get a dog? Lily called from the yard. We'll see, Grace and Colt answered in unison, then laughed. This is enough, Colt said quietly, more to himself than to Grace. After all the running, all the violence, all the loneliness, this is more than enough. Grace tilted her face up to kiss him. It's everything. The circuit preacher came through Redemption Creek in September, and Colt surprised Grace by asking if they could renew their vows. Do it right this time, not out of necessity, but out of love. So they stood in the little chapel again, but this time Grace wore a real wedding dress, stitched by the women of the town. And Lily was their flower girl, scattering prairie roses down the aisle. This time, when Colt said, I do, his voice rang with conviction. And when he kissed Grace, it wasn't chaste or careful. It was a promise, fierce and tender and absolutely sure. The years that followed weren't easy. Life on a frontier ranch never was. There were harsh winters and dry summers, cattle lost to rustlers and wolves, close calls with accidents and illness. But through it all, they had each other. Grace learned to ride like she'd been born to it, could shoot a rattlesnake at 20 paces, could deliver a foal or set a broken bone. Colt learned to laugh more, to let people in, to accept that he deserved the happiness he'd found. Lily grew tall and strong, her mother's beauty and her adopted father's steady courage. She never called Colt anything but Pa, and he never treated her as anything less than his own blood. They had 2 more children in the years that followed, a boy with Colt's blue eyes and Grace's stubborn chin, and a girl with Grace's dark hair and Colt's quiet intensity. But before those peaceful years could fully settle, one more shadow from the past needed to be confronted. It came in the form of a letter, delivered by a haggard rider on a rain-soaked October morning, 2 years after Grace's shooting. Colt read it by the fire, his expression darkening with each line. Grace watched from the kitchen, where she was kneading bread dough, her hands stilling as she recognized that particular set to his jaw. "What is it?" she asked quietly. He looked up, those ice-blue eyes troubled. "It's from my brother. Didn't even know he was still alive." Grace wiped flour from her hands and crossed to him. "You have a brother?" "Had. Thought he died in the war." Colt's voice was rough. "Ezra Dawson, 2 years older than me. Last I heard, He'd been captured at Chickamauga. The family got a letter saying he died in a prison camp. But he didn't. No. Colt handed her the letter. He's in Wyoming territory. Says he's dying. Consumption. Wants to see me before the end. Wants to make amends. Grace scanned the letter, written in a shaky hand. The words spoke of regret, of mistakes, of a man facing his mortality with eyes finally open. "You should go," she said softly. Colt's head snapped up. "I can't leave you and the children. Not with what? Harold's dead. His men are scattered or hanged. We're safe, Colt." Grace cupped his face in her hands. "This is your brother, your blood. You need to do this, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Come with me," he said suddenly. "All of you. We'll make it a journey together." So they did. Lily, now 9 years old and eager for adventure, helped pack supplies. They loaded the wagon with everything needed for the 3-week journey north, bundled against the approaching winter, and set out across the high plains. The journey was hard, but beautiful. They crossed rivers swollen with autumn rains, camped beneath skies so vast and star-filled it made Grace's heart ache. Colt taught Lily to read trail signs, to identify animal tracks, to navigate by the stars. At night, they'd huddle around the fire while Colt told stories of his childhood, stories Grace had never heard before. "Ezra was always the wild one," Colt said one evening, his arm around Grace's shoulders, Lily drowsing against his other side. "I followed him into every kind of trouble you can imagine. When he said we should steal Old Man Henderson's horses, I didn't question it. When he said we should run away and join the army, I packed my bag." His voice dropped. "When he got captured, I wasn't there. I'd been sent on a different mission. I've carried that guilt for 15 years. "You were just following orders," Grace murmured. "Doesn't make it easier." Colt stared into the flames. Brothers are supposed to watch each other's backs. They found Ezra in a mining camp called Silver Ridge, living in a one-room shack that smelled of sickness and despair. He was a ghost of the man in Colt's stories, skeletal, gray-skinned, racked with coughing fits that brought up blood. But his eyes lit up when Colt walked through the door. "Little brother," Ezra rasped. "You came." "Course I came, you damn fool." Colt's voice was gruff with emotion. He pulled up a chair beside the bed, while Grace and Lily waited respectfully outside. Through the thin walls, Grace could hear the murmur of their voices. Two brothers trying to bridge 15 years and a war's worth of pain. The reunion was bittersweet. Ezra had stories of his own, of surviving the prison camp, of wandering the territories looking for gold that never materialized, of bad choices and worse company. "I heard you'd gone straight," Ezra said during one of Grace's visits, when she brought him soup he was too weak to eat. "Heard you married a lady, had a family. Didn't believe it at first. Colt Dawson, the outlaw who swore he'd never settle down." "Life changes you," Colt said simply, his hand finding Grace's. "She changed you," Ezra corrected, smiling at Grace. "Can see it in how you look at her. Like she hung the moon." He coughed, winced. "You're lucky, brother. I never found that. Never found anything worth more than the next bottle or the next card game." "It's not too late," Colt said, but they both knew it was a lie. Ezra had maybe weeks left, if that. Grace spent those weeks getting to know her brother-in-law, sitting with him when Colt needed to step outside and compose himself, reading to him from the Bible when he asked, holding his hand during the worst of the coughing fits. She saw glimpses of the man he'd been, charming, reckless, full of dreams that never quite materialized. "Take care of him," Ezra told her one afternoon when they were alone. His voice was barely a whisper now. "My brother, he acts tough, but he feels everything too deep. Always has." "I know," Grace said softly, "and I will, I promise." Ezra smiled. "You're good for him. You and that little girl, you're what he needed all along. Purpose, family, something worth being better for." "You could have had that too," Grace said. "Maybe in another life." Ezra's eyes drifted closed. "But I'm glad he has it. Glad one of us Dawson boys made it out of the darkness." Ezra died on a cold November morning, with Colt holding one hand and Grace holding the other. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the valley, marked his grave with a simple wooden cross, and said the words that needed saying. On the journey home, Colt was quieter than usual. Grace gave him space to grieve. But on the fifth night, as they lay together in their bedroll under the stars, he finally spoke. "I keep thinking about all the years we lost, all the time we could have had if things had been different." "You can't change the past," Grace said gently. "You can only learn from it." "I learned something these past weeks." Colt pulled her closer against his chest. "Learned that life's too short to leave things unsaid, to waste time on anger or regret." He turned her to face him in the darkness. "I love you, Grace Dawson. I love the life we've built, the children we're raising, the woman you've become, and I'm not going to wait for some deathbed to make sure you know it." Grace's throat tightened with emotion. "I love you too, more than I thought it was possible to love another person." They made love there, under the stars, slow and tender and fierce all at once, reaffirming the bond between them, celebrating the life they still had ahead. When they returned to the ranch, winter was settling in hard, but the cabin was warm, the animals were healthy, and neighbors had looked after things in their absence. Life resumed its rhythms, feeding stock, mending fences, teaching Lily her letters, preparing for the baby Grace was now carrying. The second child, a boy they named Ezra after his uncle, was born on a spring morning when the prairie was covered in wildflowers. Colt held his son with the same careful tenderness he'd shown Lily that first night, and Grace watched her husband fall in love all over again. "He's perfect," Colt whispered, touching the baby's tiny fist. "He looks like you," Grace said, exhausted but happy. "Same eyes, poor kid." But Colt was smiling as he said it. Lily adored her baby brother, helped care for him with a seriousness that made both Grace and Colt smile. She'd sing to him during fussy evenings, help change his diapers without complaint, tell him elaborate stories about the ranch and the animals and the adventures they'd have when he was older. 3 years later, their daughter Sarah was born. A tiny, fierce thing with lung power that could wake the dead, and Grace's stubborn determination written all over her face. The cabin was full now, noisy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. The years passed in a blur of childhood milestones and ranch work, of droughts overcome and winters survived. Colt's reputation as a former outlaw faded into legend, replaced by his reputation as a fair dealer and a good neighbor. Grace became known throughout the territory as a woman who could heal the sick, deliver babies, and shoot straight when necessary. They faced challenges: a fire that nearly destroyed the barn, a winter so harsh they lost half the herd, rustlers who learned the hard way that Colt Dawson's family was off limits. But they faced everything together, the way they'd promised. On their 10th anniversary, Colt took Grace riding to the place, by the Colorado River where they'd first met. The water still ran copper red in the sunset. The cottonwoods still whispered in the wind. Their children were home with a neighbor, giving them this rare moment of solitude. "You remember what you offered me that day?" Colt asked, pulling her close against his chest. "My wedding ring. All I had. It wasn't what I needed." He turned her to face him, brushed a strand of gray-threaded hair from her face. "I needed you. Needed someone to build a life with, to give my heart to make me believe I could be more than my past. You gave me that, Grace. You and Lily. You saved me just as much as I saved you." Grace smiled up at her husband, at the lines time had carved around his eyes, at the silver beginning to show in his dark hair. "We saved each other," she corrected. "Together." "Together," Colt agreed, and kissed her there by the river where their story began. Two broken people who'd found a way to make each other whole, building something beautiful in the harsh and lovely wilderness of the West. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Grace's breath caught. Inside was a ring, not her old wedding band, but something new. A simple gold band with a tiny diamond that caught the sunset light. "Bought it in town last month," Colt said, suddenly awkward, in a way that made Grace's heart melt. "Wanted you to have something that was chosen, not given out of desperation. Something that represents what we really are." Grace's eyes filled with tears as he slipped it onto her finger beside her original ring. "It's perfect. Like you." He kissed her again, deeper this time, with the passion of 10 years of love and partnership. "Like this life we've built. Like every damn day I get to wake up next to you." They stayed by the river until the stars came out, talking about their children's futures, about expanding the ranch, about growing old together on this land they'd made their own. As they rode home under the moonlight, Grace thought about that desperate woman who'd knelt by this same river a decade ago, ready to trade her last possession for a chance at survival. She'd offered gold and been given so much more. A home, a family, a love that had grown deeper with every passing season. She'd found a partner who saw her as an equal, who respected her strength, who loved her fiercely and gently all at once. And Lily, her precious daughter, who'd asked a stranger to be her father for just one day, had gotten a father for a lifetime. A man who'd chosen them when he didn't have to, who'd protected them against all threats, who'd built them a life of safety and love in a dangerous world. As they approached the cabin, warm light spilling from its windows, children's laughter drifting on the evening air, Grace sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. This was more than she'd ever dreamed possible in those dark days of running and fear. This was home. This was family. This was love, real, hard-won, and absolutely worth every moment of the journey that had brought them here. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Grace and Colt's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.